Tonight on The GOAT Show.
If you own a gun, you're on a list.
Have the ability to immediately pardon people.
Conspiracy to commit defamation.
It is because I'm in Canada.
I spent 5.5 years in a lawsuit.
What about satire and parody?
Tell me what a card catalog is.
5-second sound bites. Welcome to The GOAT Show, the show where we celebrate and debate all things great. I am joined by my co-hosts, Fresh and Deezy. Gentlemen, how you feeling today? Are you feeling wealthy today in this market, this crypto market that we got going on?
I mean, my bags are up a little bit today, but you know what I'm not feeling today? As wealthy as I feel, I'm not feeling very free.
You're not feeling very free.
No.
Dang.
It's because you're in Canada.
It is because I'm in Canada. It is.
What about you, Deezy, out in Arizona? How you doing? How's your crypto bags? How's it going with those?
You know, crypto's fine. I'm trying not to get rinsed by the up and coming meme coins. But Drip House is doing solid, so we're doing good.
Drip House is always solid. We love those guys. Check us out on Drip House. We'll put the links in the show notes. If you don't know who I am, if you're new to the show, my name is ZiLLY, aka Ravine. I will be your host for today, and today we're going to be talking a lot about crypto, CBDCs, economics, all kinds of stuff. And we have a special guest today that we'll get to momentarily, Mr. Aaron Day. But before we do, Fresh, what do the people watching out there got to do?
You got to like. You got to subscribe. You got to hit the bell. You got to comment. You got to send it to somebody who likes crypto. Send it to somebody who doesn't. Send it to somebody who needs to learn about CBDCs.
In fact, you're going to really want to do that because the gentleman that we're talking to today, Mr. Aaron Day, he is, in our opinion, the GOAT of understanding the threat of CBDCs and understanding that maybe the crypto that you love out there may not be the best crypto to hold. So, Mr. Aaron Day, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So we met through a mutual friend, Angela McArdle, who we just did an interview with. And you are part of the organization that she supports, which we can see on your screen right now, freerogernow.org for freeing Roger Ver, who has been unjustly, in our opinion, detained by the feds. Maybe we can speak on that real quickly and sort of your involvement in that, and then we can get into sort of the bigger idea of CBDCs and stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, Free Roger Now is just a grassroots movement. It's not really a formal organization. It's just it's a bunch of people who support Roger that are trying to raise awareness, similar to how Lynn Ulbricht has been raising awareness about her son's case, with the hope that we can actually help Roger secure a pardon on day one, based on his situation, which I'm sure we'll get into in more detail. But he's basically looking at 109 years in federal prison for the act of actually paying his taxes. It's a very clearly politically motivated case.
For sure. And we did talk about it with Angela, but I think from, we did a space with you and Angela yesterday. And I know that you really went into the details. 109 years is absurd. And for anybody who hasn't, seen the previous episode that we did on this, maybe you can explain that real quick. Roger's basically being charged with not selling Bitcoin that he owned back in 2014, even though he is no longer an American citizen. Is that the idea?
Yeah, correct.
I want to point out too, before you get started, 109 years. There are child molesters that get 20 times less time than that. So it's absolutely gross.
Yeah, no,
it really is.
It's very obviously a fabricated political case, and they're trying to shut him up, and they're trying to set an example of him. I will say that I was at a conference a few months ago, and somebody there, for some odd reason, was from the IRS, some senior person from the IRS, who at least claimed to be a dissident, and was saying that these 87,000 new IRS agents that are being hired, the number one area that they're hiring for is crypto enforcement. So if this case against Roger is successful, that means that they're going to go after everybody in crypto. So regardless of which coin you prefer, whatever, even if you don't like Roger's views on one crypto versus another, his case is a precedent that affects everyone. And essentially what happened is you actually have to take a step back with Roger. He's been a libertarian for his entire adult life. And he had an encounter with the law in like 2000, 2001, where he was thrown in federal prison for 10 months for selling fireworks. They claimed illegally, even though major retailers and other people were selling these same fireworks. He's literally the only person who ever went to federal prison for selling these fireworks. And it's because he was a vocal person out there saying taxation is theft, war is murder, funded by theft, and other things, also talking about the ATF. And that's why he ended up in federal prison, where he was essentially tortured, and there's a whole video about this. And so right around 2001, 2002, once that case was over with, Roger was pretty adamant about the fact that he wanted to leave the United States. So he actually had, I think, moved to Japan or something in like 2006. So but he was struggling to get citizenship somewhere else because of this federal conviction for the fireworks charge. So he officially expatriated in 2014 and became a citizen of St. Kitts. And so he hasn't been a U.S. citizen for over a decade. And when you leave, people often say, particularly if we're libertarians, if you don't like it here, just leave. That is easier said than done. So Roger actually hired attorneys, hired accountants, hired the best firm in the United States for calculating the valuation of his cryptocurrency. So he complied with the law. And with a little bit of context, in 2014, even by the IRS's own admissions, they didn't have clear guidelines for the taxation of Bitcoin. A lot of people, in fact, most people weren't even paying tax on Bitcoin. I know subsequent to Roger's case, I think Coinbase retroactively sent paperwork to like 90,000 people saying, hey, you haven't paid your taxes. Roger actually paid his taxes. And the other interesting thing is when you leave, you're required to basically sell all of your assets and then pay a percentage to the federal government. Well, at this point in 2014, the largest exchange, Mt. Gox, had just collapsed. So if Roger had sold all of his Bitcoin, it literally would have tanked the market. I think you could make the argument that he would have owed zero because he literally would have tanked the entire market. So now they're going after him almost 10 years later, when the statute of limitations is almost up, right after he wrote a book critical of Bitcoin and the fact that it's shifted its story from being digital cash for the world that basically replaces central banks to now this digital gold narrative where you buy it through BlackRock and you never hold it, you never spend it. And he had just started exposing that and doing media interviews. I had interviewed him, and within 3 weeks of this book coming out, he mysteriously gets arrested in Spain and thrown into the same prison that John McAfee was in when he met his death, a few years back. And so and to make matters worse, throughout this entire process, they violated his attorney-client privilege. They raided his attorney's office and are trying to use the information against him from that process, even though the information itself shows that Roger was actually trying to comply with the law. So this case affects everyone. So whether you're in crypto or not, your right to rely on counsel and attorney-client privilege is something that it's a fundamental right for everyone, regardless of which type of case you're dealing with. But then beyond that, if he loses, it means that the IRS can just retroactively make up rules about what the taxes should have been at some previous point in time and then go after you for it.
Exactly.
The thing that scares me is the implications that it means for the legal system. The police, detectives, they no longer have to make cases. They literally just have to wait for you to talk to your lawyer and then go to them for the information.
Yep.
Like, I don't think people realize how big of an issue that is.
Yep. You can't talk to, this now means you can't talk to your lawyer. This means you can't talk to anyone. And by the way, I found some other things. And when we talk about CBDCs, there's something called a national security letter, which is part of this Patriot Act, where they can come in, issue a letter, and basically, shut you down and put you in a position where you can't talk to anyone about your case, including a lawyer. So this is something that we joke about. We don't have a constitution. The Bill of Rights was shredded probably on 9/11. And but this is just next level what they're doing or trying to do to Roger.
Yeah, I mean it's scary, man. It's unbelievable. And for anybody out there, I know with like we're I'm not gonna say what we're into, but we invest in crypto. I have some alts, I have some memes, I whatever. It doesn't matter what token you're in. It doesn't matter if you love Bitcoin or hate Bitcoin. It doesn't matter, if you only hold privacy coins. It doesn't matter because with Roger, if they can do it to him and they can get away with this, then they can do it to you and they can get away with it with you. And so, yeah, so you're part of freerogernow.org. For anybody, if you're sitting there, you're wondering what you can do. What you can do is go to freerogernow.org and you can sign a petition. It's right there, first thing you see on the page. Don't worry about being on a list. I hear that all the time. Oh, I don't want to be on a list. You're on a list. Just face it. You're on a list. If you love liberty, if you've ever bought crypto, if you're, watching, you're probably watching the show. I don't know. If you're on a list.
If you own a gun, you're on a list.
If you own a gun.
If you watch anything with me in it, you're on the list of lists. So it is what it is, man.
And would you agree with that, Aaron? Like, don't worry about the list. Just get your voice. Well, I should add this as well. We had Angela on the show. Angela has the ear of the president. She has gotten a promise from Donald Trump to free Ross Ulbricht. I mean, she has the access. So it's not like you're signing some petition hoping that something happens. Like, these signatures are going to go to her, and then she's going to put that in front of the president to try and make some changes. Not just with Roger, I think, but also just this whole scenario that we're talking about with robbing people of their attorney-client privilege, going after crypto people, all that kind of stuff. Would you agree with all that, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not willing to stand up for Roger under these circumstances, you're already in a mental prison, and the pods are only a few months off. I mean, at this point, if we don't stand up for this is probably the clearest case of right and wrong. I will tell you, this is such an egregious case that I have 14-year-old twins, and they've helped out on this. My daughter helped create these T-shirts when we had an event back in May. My son's worked on some website stuff, and so this is a clear case of right and wrong. And if you're in the Liberty community, a lot of people don't know how much Roger has done outside of crypto, and that's part of the story that I think needs to get out. Understand, Roger, who's been very vocal about libertarian issues, basically has a gag order. He can't speak for himself at all, and he potentially risks having his bail revoked and getting thrown back into a Spanish prison. So for a guy that's a vocal activist, he's now completely silenced. And so I'm trying to help get the word out about who he is as a person. He's funded antiwar.com. He's funded FEE. I'm at the Brownstone Institute, which, if you like the work that the Brownstone Institute has done on lockdowns, on mandates, on the censorship industrial complex, and now CBDCs, understand that none of that would have been possible without Roger. And I didn't know this when I got involved, but he was the founding donor and is a board member. And he's helped countless people privately that during COVID and during other situations that is not known. I think he's one of the largest funders of Ross Ulbricht's legal defense, and he's helped many others that I can't talk about. But I'm hoping I can get these people to come forward as well, because this is he's being targeted because he believes in the things that we believe in, because he believes in voluntary interaction, he believes in the non-aggression principle, and he's an effective advocate for these things.
Wow, I didn't know that, and that makes a lot more. I mean, that makes even more sense now why they would target him and try and destroy him. So, for anybody who wants to, help Roger out, we'll put it in the show notes. It's freerogernow.org. Sign the petition. Let's get all those signatures as many as we can get. Share it with your friends, and that's going to go in the hands of Angela McArdle, and she's going to be able to get that. Hopefully in front of the president, and hopefully we can fix this wrong that's happening.
And by the way, I want to say I think she can do it. She's been incredible. I mean, I've been involved with the Libertarian Party for a long time, and what she's been able to do is the most in terms of like tangible impact that I've seen. So she truly did facilitate this Ross Ulbricht thing, and she's very much committed to helping Roger as well. So I would absolutely say sign the open letter. And here's the other thing. So Ross Ulbricht has like 600,000 plus people that have signed, and it's taken 10 years for that to happen. We obviously don't have 10 years. So, and there's another challenge with this. Whenever you post links to external sites on social media, they're suppressed because, Elon Musk wants to keep all the traffic on his site. Zuckerberg wants to keep all the traffic on his site. So what I've found is the most effective is just DM people or text people or send something on Telegram or Signal with a direct link to ask them to sign as well. That's probably the fastest way to get this done.
All right, everybody. All right, you goats, you know what to do. Go do it. But you did mention that you've been involved in the Libertarian Party. You've mentioned that you're involved with the Brownstone Institute. So I want to learn more about you, Aaron, because we were introduced through sort of Angela, and then I started researching you, and I was like, holy crap, this dude! Like I don't know why I've never heard of you before that happened, but I'm like, this dude is in it. I mean, we'll go through it, but I think before we get into sort of your journey in liberty, we have a question that we always ask our guests on the show, and that is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
The ability to immediately pardon people.
Well, you did run for president, so we'll get to that in a second. But that's a good one, man. Well, from superpowers to superhero origin stories, where are you from originally? What was life like growing up for you? I know that you have family. Like, what can you tell us a bit more about sort of your upbringing and your beginnings?
I grew up in Indiana, so that's where I spent the first 18 years of my life. A little bit of time in Michigan, and I know often in the liberty community, people ask the question, what radicalized you? And I like to define my life in terms of three distinct, unique times where I was radicalized. The first was, I'm the kind of guy that, I didn't come to liberty late in life. I started an Ayn Rand club when I was in high school. So, and then I started dropped out of college and got a bunch of other people to help drop out of college and start this internet company with me in 1995.
So I identify as my pronouns are anarcho-objectivist. So the principles of Ayn Rand, the application may be more on the Michael Malice side, but I really want to take a slight detour into. I think I read that your favorite book is Atlas Shrugged. What is Ayn Rand meant to you? Does she still mean something to you? Do you still, pull anything from sort of that objectivist side of things when it comes to liberty?
Somewhat, although I think I went through a kind of, whatever you want to call it, a spiritual awakening, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, in 2019. And so I wouldn't strictly call myself an objectivist. I think I question the atheist side of things now. I've moved away from that part of it. I will say, though, that the capitalism and voluntary exchange part of it I've kept. So at this point, I try to actually throw off all labels. I think if there's anything that I believe in, it's, it's free will over determinism, it's love over fear, decentralization over centralization, and abundance over manufactured scarcity. So I don't know what that means. I don't know that actually fits into any of the existing buckets, but Rand was very influential for me early on, and this is what kind of motivated me to drop out of college and start my first company. And then I was radicalized by the fact that what I realized after meeting with 150 venture capitalists and talking to people on Wall Street, and remember, I was kind of young, like being 19 and starting a company wasn't cool. Like, that wasn't cool back then. It's become more.
What year would you say this was about? Like, is this like .com era?
This is 95. This is early .com era. This is like actually before the .com era was the .com era. This was when we basically just had web browsers. In fact, I brought my math professor in because we were doing an e-commerce company to help figure out how to use encryption because people were afraid to use the internet to put their credit card information in. So that's how early that was. And so I realized, like, from Ayn Rand's like Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, or what you read about in Atlas Shrugged, our current system, even in 1995, didn't function like that. We already were at peak cronyism, and I learned that about Wall Street and about the venture capitalists in particular, who I call venture socialists. And not to go off on a real tangent there, but what you find, something always bothered me. So why are all of these big tech companies woke? Why was Twitter what Twitter is? Why was Facebook what Facebook is? And I finally figured it out. And people don't necessarily know how venture capital works, but essentially venture capitalists they raise money from outside parties themselves. And it turns out that over half of the money that venture capitalists raise come from taxpayer-funded sources, either public pension funds. In fact, the largest single investor across all venture capital firms is the California pension system. And then you also have university endowments. So what happens is this California pension system says, oh, yes, we'll put $200 million in your venture capital fund, but you have to agree that you're only going to invest in companies in California, which is why there are so many tech companies in California. And then they start putting a social agenda behind it. So I call it venture socialism. This is where you're using taxpayer money, and what you invest in is being determined by people involved with a public pension fund. That's not capitalism. And that was really eye-opening for me. So then after that experience, I sold my first company. I started a healthcare company, and it was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and Attorney General Eric Holder. But unlike some of the friends that I have now who were specifically targeted by the government, I was literally just collateral damage. There was nobody at the government that said, "Oh yeah, we're going to figure out how to destroy this guy's company." It just happened that way through it.
Was it collateral damage from the economic crisis in 2008, or is it just something, some other?
So we had a system that we offered a program where we used financial incentives to reward employees for improving their health, and it was for measured health outcomes. And Obamacare basically said, well, you can't use these tax-free dollars for measured results. You can basically only pay people for participation. So the essence of my business model was the use of financial incentives for measured results, and I got participation trophied by Obamacare. So that was one aspect of it. Then the kinds of rewards we were giving people, because of Dodd-Frank, we were giving people debit cards that could be reloaded every quarter, and people would earn rewards cumulatively. So it was about rewarding people for sustaining health improvements over time, because that's the kind of incentive you need. Well, the company providing our reloadable debit cards had to cancel that business because of Dodd-Frank. And then we were using a check writing service to pay people. And Eric Holder came into this check writing service and said, hey, one of your 3,000 clients may be involved in offshore gaming. And so they froze everybody's account. So we were like bouncing $500,000 worth of checks that were going out to nurses all over the country for participating in the program. So at this point, the government says I can't offer my solution through Obamacare. And now because of the way Eric Holder and Dodd-Frank worked, I can't even use incentives. I can't even pay people these financial incentives. So it essentially destroyed the company.
That's super smart. That's a great way. You almost gamify healthcare where you people they're incentivized to keep up on themselves, and that's going to be saving us money in the long term, when they're not always resorting to big pharma and drugs to stay alive. So that's cool. I hope that comes back around.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it worked. So our customers were actually seeing their healthcare costs drop by like 5%. And of course, it was a completely voluntary model. So the approach of it was anybody can participate, and nobody's being forced to participate. We're using the carrot, not the stick. And we provided a platform that gave people choice. So we weren't coming in and being very prescriptive about how they go about improving their health. We were giving them a marketplace of options. I mean, it was completely a free market voluntary approach. And of course it worked. And I learned a lot about how just healthcare and insurance, the incentives are not aligned to actually improve people's health at all, which I think people now know explicitly based on, incentives for COVID vaccinations and everything else. But I got a bird's eye view of that in like 2004. And so it's a shame. It's a shame. And so I was first radicalized by basically saying, hey, look, Wall Street, we have crony capitalism. We don't have free markets. And then I thought government was incompetent. So I became a full-on liberty activist, moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, ultimately became the chair of the Free State Project for a while, started some political action committees, and my wife did as well. She ran the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. We helped get a couple hundred people elected at the state level. And then for a variety of reasons I won't go into, I gave up on politics. I realized I don't think we can vote our way out, basically.
I love this. This is like, I love it because you've gone through all the different levels of this thing, from the just being an entrepreneur, being in politics, out of politics. I do want to ask you a couple of things though, because I follow these different kind of groups, and I'm just kind of curious what what your thought is. So I know that you're part of the Brownstone Institute. That's with Jeffrey Tucker. Is that's correct? And that's sort of I guess a libertarian think tank, or how would you describe the Brookstone Institute?
The Brownstones, you know what, the interesting thing is I wouldn't even call it libertarian. It's actually a fascinating thing that he put together. So essentially, in 2020, when all the lockdowns and mandates happened, all of these Beltway libertarian groups like Cato failed everybody. The same with Students for Liberty. They came out the exact wrong way on all of these issues, completely abandoned libertarian principles. And so Jeffrey started the Brownstone Institute because he wanted to get the truth out, but he also wanted to help people who had been fired, or all of these doctors and all of these people in these other categories who had been canceled for speaking the truth. And so that was the real genesis of the Brownstone Institute. And the interesting thing is, Brownstone has these retreats where there are like 30 or 40 people at great events. And so basically the fellows and the people that are working on various projects, I'm doing the CBDC part, others are doing the censorship industrial complex in these other areas. And I would say over half of the people that are participating in the Brownstone Institute actually came from the left. So it's not politically ideological. It's about the truth. And so it's really interesting what he's put together. And there's nothing like it, actually. There is no organization like the Brownstone Institute. So you would think based on Jeffrey's background. I met Jeffrey when I was running the Atlas Society. So I've known Jeffrey for over a decade, and he's obviously.
And I wanted to ask you about the Atlas Society, because I still follow them and what they're doing. So I wanted to kind of get your take on that, because you ran the Atlas Society, right? You were like executive director.
Yeah, I was the CEO for a few years. So while my company was being destroyed, I was simultaneously kind of doing the Atlas Society, helping the Atlas Society through a kind of a rough patch. And so it was a temporary situation. And it was when actually the Atlas Shrugged movies were coming out. So I was hopeful when I first got involved that, hey, maybe these Atlas Shrugged movies would help, spur people's interest in this. And, that didn't quite work out the way I think we'd all hoped. But nevertheless, it was fascinating to be a part of that process.
I will say, I do fantasize about doing an AI anime, like TV show of Atlas Shrugged. So maybe in like 4 or 5 years, the whole thing could be made faithfully to the book with AI and just put on the internet or something like that.
Or maybe even 4 or 5 months. Actually, if we get time later, I'm going to play. I've been making some songs for this Free Roger campaign that are crazy. I've been playing. So if we have time, I might play one of them, because it is mind-boggling what's going on there. But yeah, I would love to see Atlas Shrugged. And again, I don't want to say bad things, because the people that worked on this had been working on trying to get that movie done for decades. But it's tough when obviously Hollywood isn't going to be on board for something like this, and so they had to make it in 3 different parts with 3 different casts, and it's pretty difficult to do something like that where the cast changes all the time. But nevertheless, it was a good experience, during that time period. And so that's where I met Jeffrey, and Jeffrey was kind of known as I guess even an anarchist in some circles. But what he's put together with Brownstone is he's cobbled together people from, there's this guy Toby Rogers, who speaks out about the vaccines, who literally was a Marxist. And I think the most interesting thing about that is to see people waking up on all sides of the political aisle. There are even some libertarians that believed that, from an objectivist perspective, we didn't all realize science was a scam. They were making up all the data, and it was all politically motivated, right? So a lot of people have had an awakening, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, or a libertarian. And Brownstone really is a place where people with these different perspectives are actually coming together with an emphasis and an interest on pursuing the truth.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear that. I do want to ask you real quick, because you mentioned the Free State Project. What are your thoughts on that? I follow Jeremy Kauffman and the people that are involved in that on X. I'm kind of curious what you think about the Free State Project. You're still in Bedford, New Hampshire, last I checked. Is that correct?
No, I moved to southern New Hampshire. I should probably update various things. We could talk about things for hours and hours about the political activism that I've done here. I ended up in a $286 million lawsuit for 5.5 years, and this could go in a whole variety of different ways. But I truly support the Free State Project, and I mean, I'm not actively involved in terms of, like, I'm not on the board anymore or any of that. But I certainly participate in Liberty Forum and also PorcFest, and I do think that New Hampshire is the best shot that we have in the United States. Hands down, that is the case. And in fact, one of my friends who is a Free Stater who we helped get elected as a state rep in, I think, 2014, is now the majority leader for the House. I mean, and this is a guy that he's really hardcore. So I think there are 100 or 150 people in the state house now that are aligned with the Free State Project, and so I fully support the Free State Project, and it's sad to see what happened to Jeremy. That's actually part of, as we get into talking about CBDCs and then Ian Freeman. I mean, it's the funny thing is, I like to say about the Free State Project, because I'm married and I've got kids, and I'm traveling all over the country, so I'm not doing as much of the social stuff anymore. I mean, there are places throughout New Hampshire where there are events every day if you want to hang out with people, and I'm either busy or traveling or spending a lot of time with my kids. But there are 2 times that I see Free Staters, and that's either at Free State Project events or court hearings. Literally, I think court hearings probably more than even the other events where we're meeting. I think the last one was Ian Freeman's sentencing hearing, and there were like probably 100, 200 people there, and so people are really active.
I'm not familiar with that. Who is Ian Freeman, and what's he being accused of, or what are they going after him for?
Ian Freeman and Mark Edge started Free Talk Live. So I don't know if you're familiar with Free Talk Live. It's a nationally syndicated radio show, and they've been promoting liberty for, I don't know, 2 decades plus now. And I learned about the Free State Project. I learned about it online, but then I actually started downloading the Free Talk Live podcast, and that's what helped me make the decision in 2008 to move to New Hampshire. Now here it gets even more wild. Roger Ver learned about Bitcoin from Ian Freeman and Mark Edge on Free Talk Live in 2010. So Ian was very involved in setting up Bitcoin ATMs, even started a church, and would help businesses get set up to take cryptocurrency. And the feds basically spent a lot of money trying to set him up. And long story short, he ended up being sentenced to federal prison for 8 years for essentially selling Bitcoin without a license. Even though, I mean, we go into all the details, he actually had an opinion letter from a lawyer, and he actually thought what he was doing, kind of similar to the Roger case, he had consulted lawyers and was actually following what he thought was the law. And the DOJ and others went after him relentlessly. And so now he's in federal prison for 8 years.
Wow, man, this is wild, and you don't even hear about this from pretty much anybody except within the circles that we run in, and it's just I don't know, pisses me off, to be honest with you. But I want to talk about, because you said that you were in this phase of your life, you were in the political sphere, you were working hopefully within the system to make change. I from what I read, you tell me if this is accurate. You ran for governor, senator, and president. Is that accurate?
It is accurate for different reasons. At no point was I actually running to get elected. But I learned early on, and what Angela's doing a great job of now, is you can have a bigger impact as a third party. So when I ran for U.S. Senate, I'll give you the short form of it. Because of my experience with my company being destroyed by Obamacare, when I moved to New Hampshire, I wanted to stop the expansion of Obamacare, which Medicaid expansion was actually part of that. And I've been in both the libertarian side and the Republican side, kind of alternating back and forth from a pragmatic perspective. And so when I got involved at the state level, the Republicans were actually trying to push Medicaid expansion. Even though if you go back to 2012, even the GOP platform and everybody else coming off of the disastrous 2012 race, a group of us got together, different kind of faction leaders, and said, well, look, let's try to unite around one thing. What was the one thing? Stopping Obamacare in all of its forms. Well, then it turns out the Republican-controlled state Senate was the one actually pushing Medicaid expansion. And then anyway, long story short, I ended up finding out through a lot of research that the reason that the Republicans were pushing this was to protect Kelly Ayotte and her U.S. Senate seat. Their thinking was, unless Republicans passed Medicaid expansion, she would lose her Senate seat. So I said, listen, I don't care about D.C. If you're going to screw up New Hampshire to protect one politician in the swamp, then I'm going to run a slate of independent candidates to cost you the election so that you don't repeat that behavior. So I recruited a slate of candidates, and it turned out to be the most expensive U.S. Senate race per capita in the history of the United States, and I cost Kelly Ayotte her seat. Ended up getting into a lawsuit for 5.5 years and everything else. But that's why I ran for U.S. Senate.
I know it's probably a long story, but what was the basis of the lawsuit? What would they have to sue you about?
I ended a lawsuit for conspiracy to commit defamation. So I recruited a slate of candidates, and the candidate that was running for governor is the guy that's an absolute crackpot. And I mean, he was out like he had electronic billboards and he was calling people drug dealers and everything else. And it's a whole long story. But they were basically saying,
You're saying he's calling people who support free state or free state or candidates.
no. He was calling other businessmen and other people in the state. This is a really long story, so I like it. It will probably end up being a Netflix series. It's so unbelievable, and I didn't want to talk about it for 5.5 years for a variety of reasons. And so they ended up trying to get me for conspiracy to commit defamation because this guy was saying all of these defamatory things.
Wait, just I know I don't want to belabor, but it just sounds conspiracy to commit defamation. So you're telling me you were conspiring to defame, not that you did something that they could even constitute as defamation?
Correct. I spent 5.5 years in a lawsuit, and I'll tell you how. This is part of the process. So now you have to understand So I'm a co-defendant with this other guy. I'm running for U.S. Senate. He's running for governor. The lawyer for the other side is Bill Shaheen, who's the husband of Jean Shaheen, who is a U.S. senator. And he was also the co-chair of Hillary Clinton's campaign committee. So this is what this lawsuit was like. And I mean, again, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5.5 years. There was never a deposition in my case. There was never a trial. At one point it was dismissed, and then it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reversed it because 3 of the 5 people on the state Supreme Court were aligned with one of my other political opponents. It was complete BS. But it took a big toll on my life because they were literally trying to sue me. They even tried to sue my ex-wife. It was a horrible situation from that perspective, although in retrospect I'm grateful for it because it actually gives me some experience that I can use to help Roger in his situation, because I actually appreciate the situation that he's in. But you have to understand, because it's a conspiracy charge, they're going around trying to find out if I was talking about this case. People don't understand, if you share a defamatory tweet and you knew it's a defamatory tweet, you can actually be held liable. And because of the way damages work, you can actually end up with the same financial damages that the person who actually committed the defamation experienced. I learned, I have no belief that we have any rule of law or any constitution anymore. None.
That's crazy. What about satire and parody? Does that get a pass?
If you label it, all of it can be in the difference can be if you say in my opinion or not. So if you say in my opinion, you may get a free pass. But if you just forget to say I in my opinion, you might end up like Alex Jones, or you might end up owing $286 million. It's a completely ridiculous system. And by the way, in all of these cases with Ian Freeman, with Roger, and everything else, they get you with these things. Like, part of Roger's case is, I think he's looking at 20 years for mail fraud because he mailed in his tax forms. So they use conspiracy and state lines and all of this stuff all of the time as basically a way to just completely violate your rights. And it's a routine part of their process.
Well, I always say, the Constitution either was designed to be the way it is and be used the way it is, or it was powerless to stop us from getting to where we're at.
Yep.
So I don't really understand how it even matters.
It doesn't. It just enslaves us. We sit here following these rules that the people creating the rules don't follow. They've got us. We put a leash around ourselves, and now it's absurd. So this is why when I say I've exited politics, but there's more to it. My stepmother was heavily involved in politics. She started off at a low level in Florida, and she ended up the co-chair of the RNC nationally, and was Trump's ambassador to Costa Rica. So I've seen the Republican political process up close. And by the way, me running against Kelly Ayotte as an independent while she was co-chair of the RNC didn't help like Thanksgiving dinners at all. But needless to say, when I say I gave up on politics, it's not because it's from experience, like at all levels, at the highest level to doing stuff at the state level.
What you're saying is, if you're in politics and you're involved in that system and you don't go with the program, then they're gonna go after you. I mean, they're gonna do everything, all kinds of lawfare, whatever they can do to destroy you.
They will do that. And the other thing that I like to say to people, and this is kind of an issue on the Free State Project side. The one thing that I disagree with from a strategic perspective is that there's often this belief that politics is grassroots from the bottom up. That is not how politics works. We might want politics to work that way, but it is not how politics works. Everything is programmed from the top down. All of the fundraising, all of the apparatus, I mean, it's, all of the money that goes into this, usually it's whichever party has a bigger AI and data game for get out the vote and targeting wins. The Republicans have been incredibly deficient in that regard, but, the average voter is no to low information. And when I say that, it's like the majority, 71%, can't identify the three branches of government. We have a situation where 8th graders now, I think only 28% pass civics. I mean, people are retarded. There's no other way to describe it when it comes to knowledge about this. But these people vote. So a well-targeted flyer, if you go into a nursing home the week before the election and say, hey, unless you vote for this guy, you're going to be out on the street. And by the way, we're going to bring in a bus to take you to the polling station. Well, I mean, those people, their votes count as much as the people that are obsessing over policy for 20 hours a week and debating about it online, right? And so it's kind of like part of the whole process here is we were supposed to have an educated population, and that ship has sailed.
Listen, folks, landowners only from here on out.
Put the TikTok down and pick up a book.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. 5-second sound bites. Let's figure it out, libertarians. Okay.
Listen, I need you in the comments to tell me what a card catalog is.
All right. So but here's the thing. So Aaron, you're saying, you can't do it. It's top down. So why function outside of it? What made you decide? And I should say that you're now, it's the Daylight Freedom Foundation is what you have established. So maybe you can describe that. And then also, you're something you really are focused on is, trying to fight against CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. How did you arrive at this issue specifically as well?
So when I exited politics, I thought, I want to use the technology. So the brilliance of Bitcoin is the idea that you could separate money and state, and that you could have a decentralized form of money that didn't require government control, didn't require central banks. Well, it turns out money only represents 5% of global assets. You have stocks, bonds, every other thing that you own, your car, your house. These are things that you could tokenize and basically apply the same technology as Bitcoin to, and get rid of third parties. So it would basically facilitate voluntary trade, not just with money, but with all other assets. So I started working on that in 2019, and then COVID happened. And so we saw what happened with that. And then I saw that friends of mine, and particularly free staters, people like Jeremy Kauffman, whose company was targeted by the SEC and destroyed by the SEC, Ian Freeman, were being targeted. And I wanted to look at why, because these weren't even clear edge cases, right? Like, this is, okay, Jeremy's got a site that posts videos. Ian is running ATMs. It's not like it was a huge volume business. It wasn't having a big impact on any even local bank, right?
So Jeremy Kauffman, if anybody out there's watching that doesn't know who he is, check him out on X. But he built, I think it was called LIABLE, right? Was that I think it was basically like a social network with content and had videos on it, but it was tied to crypto. Can you maybe give a brief explanation of what that was and what happened?
The briefest explanation is that it uses blockchain technology, and it's a censorship-resistant version of YouTube. That's the shortest description I can. Now, it still exists. It got bought out of bankruptcy, and I don't know who all of the players were behind it. So it's rebranded as Odyssey. So the tools still exist, but Jeremy's company got destroyed in the process. And so I saw that happening. I saw what happened to Ian, and I'm like, why is this happening specifically at this intersection of liberty and crypto? And that's when I started looking at CBDCs. I realized that the reason for the crackdown on pro-liberty crypto was to usher in CBDCs, and CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. And the end game with CBDCs, if you want to go all the way out, is to create a single global digital currency backed by energy credits. That's tied to a social credit system that basically looks like the UN Agenda 2030 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's literally what they're trying to build ultimately. They're not going to get there right away, but they're moving in pieces. And in order to be able to roll out a system like that, they need to get rid of the competition. So Biden passed Executive Order 14067 in 2022, and what this executive order does is it authorizes the U.S. government to pursue a CBDC, but it also authorized a whole of government approach to cracking down on crypto, which is exactly what they've been doing. I mean, the SEC has been going after everybody. If you raised money, the SEC is suing every major exchange that still exists. They're going after privacy technology and throwing people in prison. They've the Treasury Department, the largest settlement the Treasury Department ever got was $4 billion from Binance. You have the anti-terrorism charges. You have, I mean, when I do my workshops, I got a whole thing that goes into the detail of exactly how robust this enforcement regime is. And so I also found during this time that in 2020, there were 30 countries that were researching only CBDCs. I think China was maybe at the pilot stage. 30 countries. Now, fast forward to 2024, there are 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP at some phase of either investigating or rolling out CBDCs. 11 countries have rolled out CBDCs. There are now more CBDC accounts globally than decentralized crypto accounts. And so when I saw that growth trend, like it's eclipsing crypto, then I understood what's going on with our friends in the liberty crypto space. And to me, this is the biggest single threat to human liberty. Once they can truly program, track, and censor your money, they can control your behavior. It's essentially the end of free will itself. So I'm like, okay, well, this is a pretty big issue. And so I wanted to raise awareness. I wrote a book called The Final Countdown, and I ran for president. And I ran for president as a Republican specifically just to raise awareness around the issue. My goal was to try to get into the presidential debates so that I could tell people about this issue. I couldn't even get anybody to poll me, which was interesting given that I have run for political office before and actually had gotten a lot of press when I had run for these various things. I had a database with 3,000 contacts, and I promoted my campaign. I was one of the first people to enter the primary. And so you would think, given that my stepmother was the co-chair of the RNC, all of this other political activism, that people would have covered my campaign. Not one person covered me, including people that had covered me in the past. And it's because my message was simple. A bank run now will halt CBDCs, stop World War III, and end the Fed. I wasn't running. I wasn't running with a message of vote for me. I was running with a message of ditch the dollar now, and we can stop this stuff. You don't need to vote for any of this. We are completely compliant. Every time you use the dollar, you're funding the military-industrial complex. Every time you're using the dollar, you're funding CBDCs and all this other stuff. You want to stop that? Literally stop using the dollar. This is not complicated. But I will tell you, that is probably one of the most shadow banned terms even today. Is you cannot talk. I talked to Chris Martenson about this as well. The Federal Reserve and CBDCs are terms that are highly suppressed.
Okay, I want to unpack a few things here. So the first question I have is, I just want to go back to what you're saying with the CBDC. So the idea is that the central banks themselves are going to issue their own currency that's probably going to be will most likely be somehow global. But you're saying about energy credits. Can you explain that side of it? What does it mean that these are going to be based on energy credits?
So there's a movement called a technocracy movement, and there was actually an organization called Technocracy Inc. that was formed in the 1930s, I think 1931. They actually still are around, and they have a website. And the whole purpose of technocracy has been, if I had to sum it up, to flip the economy from being a price-based system to being a system based on energy credits. So in other words, carbon credits. And so this is an idea that's almost 100 years old. And it's a long, series of steps. But essentially, when the Trilateral Commission was formed in, I think, 72, they took a lot of these technocratic ideas and then have used those ideas to influence the United Nations. So when you actually look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and everything that they're pushing, at the basis of it is really this idea of a carbon credit based system. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, they'll never do that. I mean, first of all, from the very beginning, the UN has been about global government. And that was the initial mandate. This has been the purpose all along. But if you want to see tangibly that they're doing this, everybody can look up something called the Doconomy Mastercard. This is a product that existed from 2019 to 2022. That was just the pilot phase. This is a MasterCard that people would voluntarily sign up for that would track your carbon, and then the card would actually shut off when you use too much carbon. MasterCard already has relationships with over 150 companies. You've probably noticed this whenever you buy an airline ticket, it now tells you how much CO2 you're using. And so they have been building this infrastructure using the existing system. There's no new system needed for this. They can already, using our existing banking system, track carbon and then censor our financial transactions based on the usage of that information. So this is something that exists today, not a future concept. And so this is the end goal of this. I've outlined, I'm writing another book about this to go into detail, because I've now spent a lot of time understanding one of the conclusions that I've come to probably in the last 3 or 4 months is we already have a CBDC. So if people even heard about CBDCs at all, what they're concerned about is they don't want their financial transactions tracked. They don't want to be censored, and they don't want money being programmable. We have all of those things today. The way money is created is the federal government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve creates the money out of thin air in an Oracle database. That is, by definition, a central bank digital currency. It's already programmable. You see this with the MasterCard example I described, or if you have a health savings account. A health savings account is, it's like a Visa or MasterCard that you can only use to buy certain healthcare products at certain merchants. That's programmable money tied to our existing banking system. The largest company providing this is called Optum Bank. They have 5 million customers. It's digital programmable money. And I just saw today, I guess Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist, was on Joe Rogan, and he talked about how 30 tech entrepreneurs had their bank accounts canceled. And then I found out recently that Melania Trump, Barron Trump, Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Dr. Joseph Mercola. I mean, of course, this isn't probably a surprise to your audience or even anybody here. We've probably all either been debanked or know people personally that have been debanked. But we don't need a blockchain to be able to debank people. We don't need a blockchain to be able to program money, and we don't need a blockchain or a technological upgrade to be able to monitor people's transactions. The IRS is already using AI, working directly with banks. This is a fun thing to do. Go to your bank, download the contract, your terms of service, load it up into AI and ask it some questions. Here's what you're going to find. What you're going to find is they can cancel your account without cause. They can change the terms and conditions without your consent. They can sell or share your information without your consent. And they can change the fees without your consent. So the money in the bank doesn't belong to you already. Contractually, we've already given away most of our rights through click wrap agreements. So every time we download a piece of software or we do anything, we sign these click wrap agreements that are 30, 40, 50, 70 pages long. In fact, I took a look at this. The average American signs between 150 and 400 click wrap agreements a year. It would take you an hour a day, 365 days a year, just to read these contracts, which is why no one does it. But what we've done is we've given away our data, our privacy, a whole variety of things. The most extreme version of this is this guy died at a restaurant on a Disney property of a food allergy, and they tried to invoke his Disney Plus online services agreement to get out of the legal liability.
To say you can't sue Disney because you signed this agreement. I seen that.
So we've done this all over the place. And so I've changed I'm trying to tell people now we already have a CBDC. And if you think about it in terms of like a DEFCON index, we're in the middle, right? So it can be tracked. It's not very efficient, but it's digital. But then that worst case that they're building towards, which, by the way, neither Republicans nor Democrats are lowering the tyranny. All of these Republican bills give more power to the banks, add more reporting requirements. They're anti-privacy. There's no ideological win here from a crypto perspective. And so people need to just understand. And one of the things I'm exploring in the book as well is the idea that we already have a social credit system. It's called the tax code. We don't have an app for it. We don't have nice little bells and whistles, but what's a 401k? You can buy these things and you don't get taxed, but you have to hold them this period of time. How does education work? Healthcare expenses. We already have a social credit system. It's just tens of thousands of pages of code with no app.
Right. I have a couple of questions, which I agree with you. Since hearing about it in the first place, I've always been against it. But you're right. I mean, we already have the foundations of this thing already built and working, and especially with Mark Andreessen going on Rogan, talking about the debanked. I think hopefully that puts it into the forefront more, and people will pay attention, because the idea of losing your bank I think that's maybe where it starts. People realizing like, oh, if I have the wrong view, I'm going to lose my bank account. All my money has to go wherever. Like that's kind of a cool, maybe I don't know, a gateway into the idea of like what can happen. And I think a lot of people don't know that yet. So I'm glad that Joe's talking about that. But I have a couple questions now. Okay, we can all agree that we don't want no CBDC. All right, we want to keep our money and be free and independent and decentralized. But Aaron, I think you're saying just don't know what BTC and these other cryptocurrencies that have been around a while. What are your thoughts on BTC? Because that's the great promise of BTC. Oh, the decentralized currency network. What do you think of all these different sort of cryptos that are out already, and why are they not effective in your mind?
So I learned about Bitcoin from Roger Ver, and I actually play this clip. It's on X somewhere. I'll shoot it over to you afterwards. I play a 4-minute clip. The first 2 minutes is Roger. The last 2 minutes is Michael Saylor. And Roger initially talked about how Bitcoin was peer-to-peer digital cash for the world, for anybody, regardless. It wasn't just for the elite. It's for anyone, anywhere in the world to use. Low fees, no central banks, no government involved. Now Michael Saylor's out there. His clip says, we don't want to compete with the dollar. We don't want to compete with the euro. We don't want to compete with Mastercard or Visa. We want to comply with know your customer and anti-money laundering laws, and you better pay your taxes. And now he's saying, if you want to self-custody, basically he's summarizing. He's saying if you want to self-custody your own crypto, you must be a criminal. This is how the narrative has shifted for Bitcoin. And so Roger, he didn't start Bitcoin Cash. That's a misconception, but moved away from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash, which tried to preserve the original use case of Bitcoin as peer-to-peer digital cash. And then more recently, and I learned about this from him as well, and this has been part of the workshops, because I left out the part that I've lived on crypto, gold, and silver since 2019, stopped using a bank account. And now what I'm trying to do is not just share doom about CBDCs, I'm trying to onboard individuals and merchants to start using alternative currencies. And when you look at what's happened to Ross and Roger and Ian, it turns out that, Bitcoin is a complete public ledger, and they're using sophisticated chain analysis technology to track people's transactions. So now it's, in a way, it's kind of almost a backdoor CBDC itself. So people can actually.
Right. Sorry to interrupt, but that's something that we've talked about a lot, is the idea that there's all these, these meme coins, all these people doing whatever, pumped up fun, all that kind of stuff. And it's and they think that they're going to get away with this stuff. And I'm just like, look, there may not even be an IRS agent. It might just be an IRS AI.
Oh, AIRS is coming. If you think AIRS is not coming, you're tripping. Like, and listen, this is the thing. Like, so let's simplify it down to something that more people would maybe understand. So look at Pokemon Go. The company who made Pokemon Go just came out and said, "Hey, happy you loved our game, but we were making a whole new global tracking mapping system while you were doing that. Thank you. Take it easy." It's the exact same thing with these blockchains. I think with most of them, where it's like, you guys go, you run it, you find the problems, you do all the work, and you document everything that you do along the way on this ledger. And then when you're done, we're going to come and we're going to sift through the data and we're going to tell you all the crimes.
It's 100K. It's 100K. Michael Saylor says it's going to 1 million. Aaron, what do we do? What do we do, man?
I mean, so I'm not going to give investment advice, but the way I look at all of this is, you know, I don't want to participate in wars, and I want to have alternative currencies separate from state. So my entire focus is on the utility of having something to use, not the speculative value of it. And where I've ended up is it has to be privacy coins because they're tracking all of the other coins. You know, and we can talk about all of this. You know, they're talking about now building this Bitcoin strategic reserve. Well, what's it built on? Well, these 200,000 Bitcoin that the U.S. government has, they didn't mine it. They didn't buy it on the open market. They stole it through civil asset forfeiture from people like Ross Ulbricht. So, by the way, the consequences of this are you get pulled over for a speeding ticket in the future. The cop's going to check your phone, and if they can access your phone, they might just steal the crypto or the Bitcoin off of your phone because that's how civil asset forfeiture works. So Bitcoin, the price may go up, but understand the price is going up now because people are trying to use taxpayer theft to buy it or to use civil asset forfeiture. And so how sustainable is that? But I actually think that this is intentional and it's a backdoor so that people are now buying Bitcoin through BlackRock. And BlackRock doesn't even hold the Bitcoin. Coinbase holds the Bitcoin. So you're like 2 levels removed. The white paper says peer-to-peer digital cash, something you're supposed to have in your possession that you send to people. Now you're 2 layers removed. And so people always talk about, well, if I have my keys, the government can't stop this. Really? How'd they get 200,000 Bitcoin? When they can track who you are, yes, you could be stubborn and say, well, yeah, you may know who I am, but I'm not going to give you my keys. This is my crypto. Well, have fun for the rest of your life in a cell knowing that you have your crypto. This is a serious problem that most people are not aware of. So Bitcoin may go up, but I actually think at this point Bitcoin is a psyop. If you actually think about when FDR confiscated gold in the 30s, if you had your gold in a vault or in a safety deposit box, they just came in and took it. But if you had your gold at home, they were not going door to door. Even though you were legally obligated to turn it in, I think like 25% or more of the gold people just held on to, and they weren't going door to door. Think about how easy it would be. And it's even in the risk factors of the ETFs themselves. If the government decides to confiscate Bitcoin, do you think Coinbase and BlackRock are going to comply? It's already in the contract. Like going back to these click wrap agreements, if you signed on to the BlackRock ETF, you signed on to the risk factor of it being confiscated by the government with a click of a button. So it may go up in price, but that doesn't change the fact that we still need alternative currencies. So I look at, Roger introduced me to ZANO, ZANO, which I use, and I'm actually working on making a gold-backed privacy stablecoin using this. So imagine the privacy of Monero, but with a token that's actually backed by physical gold that you can redeem for physical gold that's not controlled by the state. To me, that's an interesting area for exploration. Monero is great, and there are other cryptocurrencies that offer. I also don't think that there's something weird that goes on in crypto. So as libertarians, we believe in free markets, and we believe in the kind of a dynamic system, and yet somehow people get religiously tied into this idea that, well, no, there's only going to be one cryptocurrency though. So we believe in free markets, but there's only one cryptocurrency. The technocrats are working on one digital currency. We should maybe be more open to the idea of a multi-currency system. In fact, we should probably embrace that. And we've lost a lot of ground because people have become zealots about their one specific coin over all others.
Well, one steel chain is just a steel chain, but a bunch of them is a bridge. Just saying. Listen, for people who don't know or understand what privacy coins are and why they are better for your privacy, what would you say? What would you say they are? Yeah, like what defines like a privacy coin as opposed to Bitcoin?
Like what makes a privacy coin, say, quote unquote, untrackable as opposed to Bitcoin?
Well, there are all kinds of different techniques, and it would take a lot of detail to go into, but there are a lot of techniques used to basically obfuscate transactions, to add in dummy transactions, and do a whole variety of different things so that you can't just go and look at the public chain and identify one individual and know whose transactions are whose. And by the way, there's an arms race even with this, because the government is certainly trying to figure out how to track these privacy coins as well. I was just at Monerotopia in Mexico City, which was a phenomenal conference. And while it sounds like it's Monero focused, ZANO was there, Pirate Chain was there, a whole bunch of these privacy projects were there. There's another interesting project called DarkFi that's being worked on right now, some anonymous tools to help developers actually build things without worrying about being thrown in prison, like a lot of these developers have been for working on privacy tools. And so it's a constant race to come up with new technologies and new ways to conceal these transactions or make it so expensive that it's and even maybe even quantum resistant, so that the government can't come in and trace these things. And so it's an exciting space to see, because it's evolving, whereas Bitcoin is kind of stagnated since 2017.
I want to, I mean, not right now, but I maybe off the show, I'd love to talk more about, the different technologies and what's working. I'd love to get some of those people on the show to talk about just how they're, building their currencies and all that kind of stuff. I think it'd be really amazing.
Well, I recommend these ZANO guys. So ZANO was the lead developer for ZANO actually was the developer, one of the developers who created the technology behind Monero. So this guy is like an OG cryptography blockchain guy who's been doing this for over a decade. I just met him in person for the first time in Mexico City. So there's some really good people. Amir Taki is another guy. If you can get him on, and this guy's some of these people are just absolutely amazing. And this is a space that I hope people explore more. The problem with this is what frustrates me is that somehow, and I don't know when this happened, but all of us, maybe it started with George W. Bush, but this whole, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear stuff. I mean, that wasn't his, but I mean, essentially he was pushing Goebbels stuff. But people believe that now. Now all of a sudden, like there's almost I saw a Cato report that 35% or something of Gen Z would be comfortable with the federal government installing surveillance cameras in the home to monitor for domestic violence. I will tell you the biggest challenge that I have is this. Boomers understand the importance of privacy, but they have a difficulty adopting new technology. Younger groups have an easy time with technology, but don't value privacy. So this is actually the biggest challenge that we have in terms of getting adoption, is how do you bridge that? How do you get the younger people to appreciate privacy and develop tools that are easy enough to use that are also privacy protecting for boomers and older folks? That's what I spend a lot of time now on, trying to solve that as I do these 4-hour workshops all over the country, and then starting next year, actually more international as well.
I'd love to go to some of those and learn a lot more about that, because I definitely, it's definitely something I think about a lot. I'm sure Fresh and Deezy feel the same way. I think I have one more question, and then, Fresh or Deezy have any questions. My question is, the big dog is in office, Mr. Donald J. Trump again. All right. He's saying Bitcoin strategic reserve. He's saying crypto czar. He's saying let's unleash the power of American crypto industry and become the number one, whatever in the world. What do you think of him? What do you think of his, his change on crypto? Because his first term, he was not friendly to crypto. He's since done his own LibertyFi, I think, crypto. What are your thoughts? Are you optimistic? Are you white-pilled in any way based on the new administration, or do you still feel like there's, we can't trust that, and we got to, focus on, working outside the system?
I still believe that we have to exit and build, and that government isn't the answer, and that the fact that people now all of a sudden are like, well, our people are in, so it's going to be different this time. That's not really historically how it works. Even RFK, not to go on a little bit of a diatribe, but you look at his stuff, it's like, I was working on stuff to help improve people's health voluntarily, and it was destroyed by the government. RFK's approach is, well, I'm going to bring in my experts, or let's go after Coke and say you can't use corn syrup anymore, you have to use sugar. Well, how about instead we get rid of the $165 billion of corn subsidies and let the market solve the problem? So I actually think people are giving up their principles, and even if RFK happens to be right and happens to implement his changes, the next administration is going to be the next guy, and you're going to have a situation like in the Soviet Union where you have a Lukashenko who's determining wheat policy, and now all of a sudden tens of millions of people are dying of starvation. So I'm not optimistic about government at all. But what I say to people, and the reason that I endorsed Trump was very specifically, you can't exit and build while your best people are in a cage. That's the single issue. So to me, I hope he follows through, and I think he will follow through. The reason I think he'll follow through with Ross, and then in particular, if we raise enough awareness about Roger's campaign, is that he has direct experience with this. Trump has been audited multiple times. The same DOJ has gone after him. His attorney-client privilege with his lawyer Michael Cohen was breached. So just out of empathy, I think he might be willing, because there's a common enemy there. But do I think government is going to be able to solve problems with different people? Do I think that he has but identify core principles for Trump? I still can't identify a single core principle. So no, government's not going to fix these things. I also don't think Vivek and Musk are going to have much success cutting government either. They're just advisors, and you're already seeing it. What has actually happened so far? So none of these people have been confirmed yet. Some people like Gates have been shot down, but we do have this guy Thune, who's now the head of the Senate. And so the confirmation hearings and everything else, and who did I see? Susan Collins or something is on the Appropriations Committee or something. It's just the absolute swamp in the Senate. So I don't think people realize how difficult this process is actually going to be, because you still have the rhinos that are funded by the banks and the military industrial complex being gatekeepers through the Congress. So again, I'm optimistic about getting our people out. I'm optimistic about exiting and building. I'm the most worried about complacency and people not using this time to build other alternatives. That is actually the biggest fear that I have. And by the way, we know what their timetable is. It's Agenda 2030. 2030 is not when they start implementing their plans. They started Agenda 2030 in 2015. This is when they want to have these things implemented. So this is a window, and I don't see Trump stopping the technocracy. So I think a lot of people are going to waste a lot of time rooting for white knights when they can instead start changing their own life and making decisions on a day-to-day basis to improve their own situation outside of government.
Wow, man, this is amazing. I'm so happy you came on, man. This is like, because I mean, I've always had in the back of my head that idea of like, okay, like who's really running the show here in crypto? Is it CIA? Is it, who really put, are we really, is blockchain really going to be the thing that allows us to get away from the Fed? And after you telling us all this stuff, man, it's like, no, like we still have to work to break away and to maintain our privacy.
And by the way, I'm not going to push my own book. I am going to push Roger's book, though. I am going to push Hijacking Bitcoin. People need to read this book, because when you read it, you'll understand why they why they tried to silence Roger. He provided incredible detail, along with the co-author Steve Patterson, about what happened to Bitcoin and who was involved. And then my book actually goes into a little bit more detail since the original hijacking. And it turns out this same group at MIT that funded the changes to Bitcoin to keep it slow and expensive and to basically change this narrative from cash to digital gold funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. And you can't make this up. This guy, Joy Ito, who ran this group out of MIT, also received funding from Jeffrey Epstein, not only for the MIT group that funded all these projects, but also for his personal venture capital group, Garage Ventures. And Epstein did one interview about Bitcoin in, I think, 2017. And it's a long quote, but basically Epstein said, yeah, Bitcoin will never be a currency. It's a store of value. So if you're buying the digital gold, you're buying the Jeffrey Epstein narrative, you're buying the Michael Saylor narrative. And by the way, Michael Saylor has been a contractor for the CIA. I think his offices are a few minutes away from Langley. This whole thing is absurd, and people need to read Hijacking Bitcoin.
Wow. Well, Hijacking Bitcoin, people. Sorry, real quick. What is your book, Aaron?
My book is The Final Countdown, but believe it or not, I'm going to say don't read it because I need to update it. I'm writing a new book that goes into a lot of the things that we discussed here today. So I'd rather people hold out for the next one.
Okay, whenever that's updated, we'd love to have you back. Deezy, you had a question?
I was just going to say, the White House doors, for every 4 years it changes, and after this administration, assuming that it's very pro crypto, if we get into one that again becomes more controlling and constrictive, do you fear for yourself, like being somebody that's been so outspoken? Do you still fear that they're going to come after you with some kind of lawfare or come after you more because of all of the stuff that you're doing now?
Well, I've had one business destroyed by the government, and then I spent 5.5 years and $280 million for the lawsuit. So, and then my friends are in prison. And I want to add one thing. When Ian had his sentencing hearing, I messaged Roger and I said, "Hey, Roger, will you tweet this out?" Because Roger has like 750,000 followers, because we wanted to pack the courthouse and show support for Ian. And then just 7 months later, Roger was arrested in Spain. So, but I look at it this way. This is a binary choice. If we don't stop this now, we're all enslaved. So the default is that we're enslaved, because the default is 2030. The default is a single digital currency tied to an AI-based social credit system. That's the default. We actually have to do something to prevent that from happening, because that is what is going to happen by default. And to put a finer point on this, when you look at groups like the WEF, Bank of International Settlements, the UN, the World Bank, combined, they employ, I think it's 65,000 people and have an annual budget of $35 billion. By the way, most of that is taxpayer funded. So we're funding, by the way, our own slavery through these multinational corporations. The WEF, they have over 1,000 partner companies. Just the top 10 have a combined market cap of $9 trillion. They employ 6.5 million people, and they have $1.5 trillion worth of cash on hand. So, because a lot of times, and I know in libertarian circles, people are like, "Oh, it's the government, they're incompetent," or whatever. It's like, this is being funded by massive interests, and a lot of it is being funded with our own money. So I don't have any fear about this. I know that if we don't stop this and we don't take these actions, we don't free people like Roger and Ian and Ross, and if we don't stop using these currencies and start developing parallel systems, that the default is digital tyranny and complete slavery.
I want to ask about the music before we go. Are you using Suno? Are you using Suno to create your songs?
Yeah, I'm using Suno, which is just it's amazing. It's just incredible.
Have you tried the new version 4?
Yeah, no, I've been working on that. There's a bunch of different songs that I've been working on. You want me to try to play one? All right, I got a couple of others, but we'll see this one. I'm going for viral. I'm going for something that's not necessarily my style of music, but I want to figure out, how do we take me dorking out for 4 hours about Roger is not going to get millions of people to hear it. So what can we do? So here's one.
From Silicon Valley to the Spanish shore, fighting for freedom, but they want something more. 10 months in prison just for speaking his mind. Now they're coming back, trying to leave him behind. 109 years for following the law. Most corrupt case that you ever saw. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free Roger now. Hired the best lawyers, did everything right. Still they raided offices in the dead of night. Used his own compliance as evidence of guilt. Now his freedom hangs on the empire they built. Speaking truth to power comes with a price, but we won't let them sacrifice. Oh, they can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free Roger Ver. Free Roger. For one of us, they come freedom for all. Either stand together now or watch freedom fall. They can't silence the truth, they can't chain what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger, free Roger now.
Bro, first of all, this track's dope. Second of all, Suno is insane, dude. It's wild.
That's why I wanted to ask.
I don't know. You guys, are you gonna make a video for it? Or you...
Yeah, so I was up until 5 o'clock in the morning. I've been playing around with this like for all week, and I'm going to turn that one into a video. There's already one on. There's a kind of a rap song that's my pinned tweet. I might even do a whole album on this, but I'm going to turn this one into a video, and because I think it might go viral. Like it's pretty catchy.
But with that, listen, I'm gonna offer you a toast, man. We toast the ghost in the show. You're definitely, the information provided makes you a goat, man. It's
Awesome.
amazing. So cheers to you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
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 And with that, I believe that is the episode. Again, thank you, Aaron, for hopping in. Listen, people, sell all your BTC. No, don't do that. No, not financial advice. But definitely look into Aaron, follow him. Look into hijacking Bitcoin, and keep your eyes open for some of these privacy coins, and I'm hoping that maybe through you, Aaron, we can get some people on that are in that sphere. But with that, Fresh, what do the people got to do?
You gotta like, subscribe, hit the bell, comment, send it to somebody. I don't really care. But then it's NFA and DYOR.